Okay. Baruchim Abayim, second shir in the series of Chazara on Hilchos Tahara. I want to point out this shir is actually a very tall order, and it's given to the right person. There's a lot of subjects under the title of how a woman becomes Tmeya, to cover Bdikis, Ksamim. I don't think we'll touch on, Rabbi Kasimov is going to touch on Kinuchim, but birth and miscarriage, Rahmano Litzlan, medical procedures, and if a woman says Tmeyani. It's a lot of subjects, and there's a lot to learn, a lot to remember. So on the table before you, there are two types of papers. There are index cards for a Q&A at the end. So if you have a shaila while the shir is in progress, just mark it down. And at the end, Rabbi Kasimov is going to take questions. There are full 8.5 by 11s to mark down. It's going to be rigorous. There's a lot to cover, and I'm not going to take much of your time. I just want to, in the name and on behalf of the community, we're very lucky and we're very lucky to have a Tahara office on behalf of the Badatz full time. Rabbi Kasimov, his phone doesn't stop ringing, and he's always available to us, to our Hamishpacha, Taharas, Labaila, and for any other medical procedures. So without further ado, you should koyach Rabbi Kasimov.
So first of all, Baruch Abayim to everybody. Yesher koyach for coming. As the Rav mentioned last week, Baruch Abayim and Baruch Hashemim. Not everyone is able in person, not everyone's in Crown Heights, but before we start the actual dinim, the halachas, I wanted to share a story, Pasha, to show how important these shiurim are, and it's b'didi ha'ovda. A few months ago, I was asked to give a shir out of town on these dinim, and it was planned already a while in advance, and punkt, it was called for a Sunday, and that Shabbos, everyone in my family was sick, and I started getting symptoms. It was not COVID, whatever virus, and I felt that's it. It's finished. I have to cancel it. The symptoms already started. Ad kedei kach. Pashat shvach. It's not. It wasn't shaykh b'metzias. It's pashat a nes. The symptoms started and stopped, and the shir went. The shir happened. We traveled to wherever the shir was. And it was talk about tzlacha. Pashat l'mayla mederech hateva. This, if the symptoms would have progressed, I would have been finished. I would be in bed the whole day, and it's not shaykh b'metzias. So Pashat the Eibishter made a nes. Pashat, these dinim are Pashat negeyas so much that people have to know ma'aser sheyasun, and in Yonei Hashkafa, the proper way to how you approach this mitzvah, so on and so forth. So, be'emes, you can ask a shaila. Be'emes is a big shaila to be asked, because we know the dinim of Eid Echad, Neman B'Yisurim, we actually learn out from Nida. The Torah says, V'safra Allah. V'safra Allah is, the Torah is saying that she's going to count for herself, and she has nemanos to do so. The Torah gave her nemanos. Ad kedei kach, and Siman Kuf Pei Hey, the Ramah brings, I'll just read it over here. Me'achish avre yamim she'efshel olimnois v'litbol ne'menes afilu b'godem v'lochlachim b'dam ne'menes leimer b'shuk shel tabachim avarti. I'll translate. The Torah Pasha gave ne'manos to the Isha when it comes to this mitzvah. Ad kedei kach, as soon as it was possible for her to count the Shiv Nikim and to Toivel, afilu, the husband sees that her begodim, or there's dam in the begodim, and she says, I went to the butcher today. The Torah says, Ne'menes, and you have no problem. And the Taz asks, 1 second, Ma'ika Mashmal, and this is Davar Pashat. Once she's able to count the Shiv Nikim, why would she not be believed? The Safra Allah. What's the Ramal coming to tell us? So he answers, an interesting answer, Afilu b'makim safik. Even if, usually she can only get a hefsek Tahara on day 6. The Re'iyah starts, she counts 5 days, and the hefsek is performed on day 6. Punkt this time, the cheshbon would have only worked out if she made on day 5, nemenis. Hey, says Lagabi, the Baal, it's a suffix. 1 second, there's something different over here. Nevertheless, the din is she has nemanus. So, what's a kasha? What's a shaila over here? So, what are we doing here? Be'inyan, what could happen? The chsanim, the husbands can learn dinei harchaka, and everything else, leave to your wife. She'll do the vestis, she'll do the shiv nikim. You don't need to know how B'dika is performed. What's the rash? What are we doing to make a whole shir chazara for men? So I'll be maked and answer with a maisa. Once by the Rebbe Tzin when I was sitting by him, I don't remember if the call came in b'shas maisa or he told it over to us, whatever it was. He got a shaila and he started asking the husband, so what about this? I don't know. What about this? I don't know. What about this? I don't know. He was asking what's doing, trying to find a tzad kula, something, whatever it is. And to everything the answer was, I don't know. So I don't know if he actually told the younger man or he just told it to us. He said, this is not Yiddishkeit. This is not Yadus. Yadus is the pshat that it's a mitzvah for both of you. If you don't know what's going on in your own family, you have a serious problem. It's not precious, it's silliness. And the emes is, when it comes to the mitzvah Taharas Hamishpacha, we don't call it Taharas Isha. Everyone calls it Taharas Hamishpacha. When it comes to these dinim, it's not just the ger to the wife, that she became a nida and now she has to become tahira. That's not how it works. The mitzvah, which everyone calls it by, is Taharas Hamishpacha, because these dinim are so important, not just for the isha to follow, but these dinim are mamish neger for the husband to be able to help, to do whatever he could, to make it easier. And another practical thing, if the husband doesn't know the dinim, you're going to make a mistake. I'm saying it's karav adavar. She's going to ask you a question, you're going to think, what's the big deal, just leave it, don't even call. What could be the problem already, right? That's mistake number 1, and it could be a big mistake. There's plenty of stories to share on that, but it's not for a public audience. So, let's start. So the topic of the shir is Keitzad ha'isha nitmas, right? This is a big topic. We know that already. Let's start with the Shulchan Aruch, and then we'll get to that. So in Siman Kuf Pei Gimel in Hilchos Nida, the Mechaber starts off, Isha sheyatza dam me'mekeira, bein be'enes, bein beratzin, the halacha is tmeya. By a lady of dam came out of the rechem, the makar means the rechem, the uterus in English. If dam left, the halacha is whether it came out be'enes, bein beratzin. We'll explain in a second what that means. The halacha is tmeya. This constitutes the tumas nida. V'hu shetagish b'yitziyaseh. She has to feel, and we'll explain what does this mean, shetagish, in a second. But she has to have something called hargasha. As it's leaving, there has to be hargasha. However, if she feels that there's a hargasha as soon as the dam was leaving, even if it didn't come out of the body, that itself is already enough. The Shach points out, even less than dam kechardol, there's a few nafkaminas, there's a bach, there's a siditaret, some tzedek, some kuf beis, not for now. So the halacha is, if this happens, yeshevas alav shiva nekiyim. Pashat, right? If a lady sees dam, bein be'enes, bein beratzin, the halacha is, she has to count the shiva nekiyim. And the Rama adds, the dinim of shiva nekiyim are explained in Siman Kuf Tzadik Vav, vein chiluk, bein pnuya, l'nesuya, le'inyan isra nida, ki kol haba al ha-nida, chayev kares. Pashat, these are Pashat dinim, this is mavur, clear in Shulchan Aruch. In order for a lady to become a nida, you have to have dam from the rechem, and there has to be hargasha. Right? If she sees something else, but it's from the rechem, that's not nida. If it's not dam, it's not nida. We'll see in a second what happens if you have hargasha without dam, the Trumas Hadeshin, we'll see in a second. So when the Mechaber writes, bein be'enes, bein beratzin, what does this mean? L'cheira, bein be'enes, bein beratzin, the whole vestas, the whole periods are be'enes, it just comes. What's trap be'enes beratzin? So the Taz explains be'enes is the pshat. There's two ways of looking at it. There's ba'enus is what's the trigger? What triggered the period, what triggered the re'iyas dam was that ba'enus, kagayin al yidei kvitzes. She was jumping, exercising. This is a common shaila. My wife was exercising today, she was jumping, v'chulu v'chulu, and dam came out. Right? So l'chayra, a person may think, this is not like the normal derech, because it was a kfitza. Something else caused it. It wasn't kifit teva haguf. It wasn't according to the natural pattern of the body. So the Mechaber writes, bein ba'enus, whether it was through the natural cause, or even if you yourself caused it, you jumped or you did another pa'ula to cause it, this itself is already considered tumas nida. And beratzin is a pshat that the goyrem, what caused it was kifi ratzin v'teva haguf, that the guf has a machzer, it has a cycle. Every, let's say, 30 days, like the Gemara says, lamed yom, a lady sees dam. So, beratzin is the pshat that the past 30 days, the dam is building up in the case like beis harachem, in the uterine lining. Now it's finished, and the ratzin haguf is the pshat that kifi teva haguf, it comes out. Yeah. But as we mentioned, that in order for this to happen, there has to be hargasha, right? So first the Mechaber writes, bein ba'enus, bein beratzin, but then we write that it has to be also hargasha. What does hargasha mean? This is the $1 million question. Anyone has an answer? Already in the times of the Shav Yankiv, the earlier Peskim, Shvus Yankiv, I'm sorry, not Shav Yankiv, the Shvus Yankiv, I think. No, Shav Yankiv, yeah, the Shav Yankiv between him and Rabbi Gavril. Already, back in the day, there was already heder hargasha. There was already no hargasha. Hey, so until now, for many, many years since the Torah was given, whatever it is, for however long it is, the derech re'iyah was, you see with hargasha, a period came and a lady knew about it, even if she didn't see the dam. Why not? Because there was hargasha, the body made up as a feeling, and she knew that the period came. Today, and already for a few hundred years, this kemat doesn't exist. And it's a big shaila. It's a big shaila. Number one, do we have tumas nida mid'oraisa b'zman hazeh? So we're going to address that in just a second. But and also, how do you measure a period? If somebody wears bigdei tziveinim, we'll see in a second, that's one of the colored garments, or davashein mekabel tuma, things that are matzil, miksamim, things which the tumas ksamim are not chalon. Can you wear such a thing the whole time and just not become nida? That's a question. If the whole thing of tumas nida mid'oraisa is hargasha, now you're telling me there's no hargasha, so seemingly it's only midrabanan. Okay, so put on something which is matzil miksamim, pashta eitza, right? Not so simple. So first of all, let's be magder. What is the get of hargasha, and then we'll see if such a thing exists today. So the Pischei Teshuvah Sekatan Aleph and Kuf Pei Gimel over there brings us 3 gedarim of hargasha. Number 1, he brings Shittas HaRambam. Shittas HaRambam, the Rambam writes, what does it mean hargasha? That she feels a shock in the body. As the dam leaves the body, there's a shock. Shinis dazeya gufa. Yeah, number 2 is Lashon HaMechaber, the Mechaber in the Shulchan Aruch. He writes that you feel psichas pi hamakar. What does that mean? That you feel the cervix opening up to release the dam. So as the dam is beginning to leave, you feel an opening that the dam is leaving. This is called hargasha. So you have Shittas HaRambam. According to the Rambam, as long as you feel a shock in the body with the seeing of blood, this is hargasha. According to the Mechaber, you don't need a shock. If you feel that it's opening, that part is opening and there's dam, this is hargasha already. And number 3, which is a diun which started already in the Achreinim, you have a big machlekes over here, something called zivas davar lach. Zivas davar lach literally means you feel a flow. You feel something wet in the body. So in zivas davar lach itself, we have 2 shittas. We have the Noda B'Yehuda. The Noda B'Yehuda learns, what does it mean, zivas davar lach? Where do you have to feel the wetness? Anywhere. If you feel zivas davar lach bifnim, that's already a hargasha. It's a big chumrah. The Chavaz Das in Simkuf Tzadik Sekatan Aleph is ma'arich to be chaylik on this Noda B'Yehuda, and he explains like this. Just like by regular hargasha, if you didn't feel it as it left the body, That's not Hargasha. You have to feel it as it leaves the body. So if you didn't feel a zivas davar lach as the dam started to leave, this is not considered Hargasha. So he's chelik on the Neder Yehuda. So according to the Chavas Das, in order for zivas davar lach to be considered a Hargasha, you have to actually feel wetness literally by the cervix as the blood is leaving. If you feel that, this is considered Hargasha. According to the Neder Yehuda, as long as there's any wetness mibifnim, this is already considered Hargasha. Then you have the fourth shitta, which is the Maram Shik, has an interesting shitta. He learns like this. The pasuk says, "At shetagish bevasada." Any hergish which is miyuchad to the iyas dam, anything that you feel in your body at the exact same moment when the dam leaves, this is considered Hargasha. So you have a headache punct as the dam is leaving the guf, but it's miyuchad. You have a strong headache, you can pinpoint a special feeling in the head as the dam is leaving. L'chayra, according to Maram Shik, this is going to be Hargasha. It has nothing to do with Eiser Malkim. It's any hergish in the guf which creates this sensation, but it has to be at the exact same time. And so, in the Tzemach Tzedek, the Stadim Lakan or Lakan, do we say Zivas Davar Lach is considered Hargasha? Is it not considered Hargasha? The Alter Rebbe, Kodesh Sachin, Sivkat and Beis, the Madir Basra, the Stadim Lakan or Lakan, Lamaisa, every single thing that we just listed, Kemat doesn't exist. So everyone's in the clear zone, so to speak. Zivas Davar Lach, when a lady says she felt wetness, she doesn't, Kemat, it never happened that you feel wetness in bifnim. The wetness is always b'bachutz. And there's only one shitta, if I'm not mistaken, the Beis Shleima is the only one who holds that that's considered Hargasha, but that's mamish, not mekubal, klal uklal. If you just feel wetness on the outside, kemat l'chol adayis, that's not considered Hargasha. And even if somebody holds like that those kemat not niskabel. So today's day and age, when there's only a hergish of wetness, this is not, it's nothing, it's garnish, it's not nachshav l'hargasha klal uklal. So there's two nafkaminas that come out of this. If it's two, tell me to talk straight. Number one, how do we have tumas nida midiraisa b'zman hazeh? The Torah says you have to be magish at shetagish b'vsada. It's a gemara nida. We'll learn out a few things from this pasuk. But hargasha is mamish in inyan, which is negeya to the whole din. If you don't have hargasha, l'chayra, there's only tumas nida midrabanan. Which obviously the answer is chas v'shalom to say such a thing. But l'maisa we have to understand, Pashut, this is a question that's Eila ala perek kemat every single day. For example, before the period starts, before the flow starts, by many people there's ksamim, there's spotting beforehand. And it's a big shaila. People don't know when do they start counting the 5 days. When are they nida? You can have spotting here 2-3 days, but the flow doesn't start. What's the cutoff point, right? If you had Hargasha, it's very simple. As soon as you're magish, that's when you start counting. That's what you mark on the calendar. It's very pashut. If there's no Hargasha, how do you define the beginning of a flow? This is mamish. The amount of shilas that come with this is a lot. And it's important to be magder. And still, it's always kedai to ask a shayla, because, people can make mistakes, and so al kaponim, there's a Marsham. The Marsham brings from the Rambam, the famous Rambam. The Rambam holds that cheskas hadam sheba behargasha. What does that mean? Let's explain. Anytime there's re'iyas dam, anytime you see blood and it's from the rechem, there's a chazaka that it came behargasha. Okay. So now he writes like this. If a lady sees Eirach Kanoshim B'Shas Vesta, or around that time of month, Eirach Kanoshim, a regular flow, so like the Rambam, I have a chazaka that it came with Hargasha. Maybe she didn't feel it, she doesn't know. It's a suffix. She's not sure if she saw Hargasha, so she has a suffix, but I have a chazaka that she saw Hargasha. Right? So you can put it in suffix, Meitzi Midei Vada. You can put it in such oisias to explain it. So, as soon as you see a flow, you can assume it came Hargasha. So now the famous question is, okay, now what? What's a flow? If I was spotting for 2-3 days, Is that a flow or not? How do you define it? What's the cutting point? So I heard from the Debret Sinadayan, the Rabbi of Carlsberg, that, and many hold like this, and everyone's going to hold it a little bit differently, but it's come out all the same thing, that it goes by sheer kamas of dam. Once you reach a sheer kamas of dam, this is already considered eirach kanoshim. When a lady is bleeding, and there's a certain sheer of dam, this is considered the regular derech that a lady bleeds, that she has a flow. And the sheer is $50 bill. Now, it's very dangerous to say this, and I'm going to explain that you can't just change your pad every 2 minutes and never build up the sheer. We'll get to that in just a second. The original marker of where this $50 or a credit card comes from, they say it b'shem Reb Moshe. So it's not in the Tuvas. You're not going to find it in the Tuvas. But I called Reb Shmuel first, the Dayan in Chicago, who's a Talmud Muvak of Reb Moshe. He sat by him for many years. He took Shemesh many years. And I asked him to confirm, is this emes that this was Reb Moshe Feinstein Shitta? And so he confirmed. He said that that whenever it was around this size, Reb Moshe was machmer. So kemat, everywhere I've seen, this is the shear which is miskabel. But there's a few catches. It's not so simple. And again, it's important, any tzad suffix, you have to ask a shayla. Because there's such a thing called as a small flow, a light flow. If you're bleeding, consistently for a few days, it could be it's a period. Just because it didn't reach the size of a credit card, don't disregard it. You have to ask a shayla. It's very important. This is a shayla of krisis over here. It's a very serious thing. And also, what I mentioned earlier, just like sometimes if somebody is having a hard time to become clean, to count the Shiv Nekiyim, often one of the Hatayrim is to switch the Beged Tachtin, the undergarment, the white undergarment, switch it often. Why? Because as long as you don't have a sheer gris and you don't allow it to build up, like some of them it works. If you didn't build up to a gris is around a dime. Not exactly a dime, a bit smaller. If you didn't reach the sheer gris, then there's no tumah, it's not a problem. This doesn't work with a period. If a lady is bleeding, changing the pad every an hour, 2 hours is not going to help you. So some say if collectively it was over the entire day, from when you woke up till the evening, if there's a shir re'iyah, if it was the size of a credit card, the size of $50, this is already most likely a flow. But again, if you have a suffix, bring it in. Because often what can happen is, not all of it is red. Some of it could be maris ksheres, colors which are okay, mixed in with a red, and that's not mitzvah. So these inyonim, don't run to be machmer on yourself, and also don't run to be makel on yourself, because to make a mistake is a very serious thing. That's why any tzad suffix, it's kedai to bring it. And again, as we mentioned, it's not exeris akasav. If somebody's having a light flow, all the cramps are there, all the simonim, all of the symptoms, thank you, all of the symptoms of the period, of the flow are there, and it's just not a huge flow. Don't run to say that it's nothing, you can write it off. There is such a thing as a small flow, a re'iyah mu'etis, which the Rav mentioned last week in Simkuf Pedalid, Shittas Arayvid. Didn't go too much into it, but just there is such a thing. Okay. Now, what's the second nafkamina? This is a famous thing that everyone learns in Chassan and Kala classes. And l'chayra, there's no need for it. Meaning you should know that it exists, but don't make yourself crazy over it. What is that? There's a din, the Trumas Hadashin, it's brought twice in Shulchan Aruch, Simkuf Peichas, Sif Aleph, and Simkuf Tzadik, Sif Aleph, twice, that any time there's a hargasha, you have to make a bedika. You have to check to make sure there was no dam. Yeah, everyone familiar with this? If somebody felt an actual hargasha, you have to make a bedika to check that there was no dam. Now, everyone makes themselves crazy because nobody knows what hargasha is. Anything you feel, you make bedikas quickly. 1, 2, 3. I learned in the Chazan class, I have to make a bedika quickly within this amount of time. According to that shit, within that amount of time. According to the Aruch HaShulchan, the Beged Tachtin is good enough. Whatever, you make yourself crazy. But the reality is, if you didn't have hargasha, the Trumas Hadasha never meant your case. If it wasn't a real hargasha, the din of the Tumas Hadeshin does not apply. If you felt wetness mibachutz, you don't have to run to make a bedika. And the Riyayet's to say that there's such a shitta that how are you yetza? If you always see maris ksheres with this feeling, so if you check 3 times, then you don't have to, the next time you feel this feeling, you don't have to check. But the emes is you don't have to make yourself crazy. Before doing anything, pick up the phone, call the Rav. The Rav is going to ask you, what did you feel? You felt that bifnim, you felt wetness on the outside, on the inside, you felt psichas piyam occur, you felt a shock in the body. What did you feel? Bada kamenusa, ruba de ruba, you'll find out there was no argasha to begin with. So you drove yourself crazy, you're in work, to run to the bathroom, to make sure nobody sees, it's not suspicious, to make a bedika, but it could be the whole thing was not necessary to begin with. So don't run to judge by yourself. If such a situation happens, at least, to pick up the phone, call, let the Rav ask exactly what was felt. If you see clearly there's no hargasha, the Rav is going to tell you that when you feel this, disregard it. So that's another nafkamina. In the same Piskei Tshuva that we mentioned by the 3 types of hargasha, the Piskei Tshuva continues to list, there's a few more things which are Medeiraisa. If seeing dam associated with one of these things, it's actually going to be Nida Medeiraisa, not just Ksamim. Number 1, Alidei Bedika Sa'ed. If you make a bedika, anything that goes inside, this is already a Deiraisa. Why is that? We mentioned earlier, the halacha is that Cheskas Hadam Sheba B'Hargasha. Dam comes with Hargasha. Now when you made the bedika, it's for sure the dam is coming from the rechem. Unless you know there's a makkah, that's different. But otherwise, there's a mishnah, Reiv Damim come from the makar, from the rechem. Most blood comes from the uterus, and you also have a karev, whatever it is. The blood is assumed to be from the rechem. Now, if the blood is assumed to be from the rechem, there's a chazaka, came b'hargasha. So when you made the bedika, this becomes a deiraisa. It for sure came b'hargasha. You didn't feel anything. So the Gemara says, she was making a bedika. The feeling of the bedika, so to speak, is svura. She had a feeling, and she thought, it's not a hargasha, it's the bedika that I made that's giving me that feeling. Whatever the lumdus is, any dam in the bedika is deiraisa. The second thing is, seeing dam b'shas tashmis. Yeah, if a period comes or you see dam right by kashir ves, whatever it is, if you see dam right there, so the tashmish, the hargasha was there. She did mamish feel it because she was kasvura, it was a hargasha hashamish. Whatever the lumdus is going to be, pel mamish, if it was dam found right away after tashmish, this does cause one nida. Or even worse, if it was found on the aver of the bowel, this is just like a bedika. Again, call a Rav. If it happens, don't be machlet l'chumra. There could be b'chalal wasn't red. Could be you don't have good lighting, and everything without good lighting looks red. It could be when you're actually going to bring the shayla to the Rav, you'll see it was yellow. Yitachin, yellow sometimes with terrible lighting, it'll have a reddish tinge. And when it happens, you're going to be, you're going to drive yourself crazy. Put it aside and bring it to the Rav the next morning. And then there's another thing, hatalas meiraglayim. Again, we're going to skip over the lumdus, why that is, but any re'iyas dam, seeing blood after hatalas mayim, the Chavaz Das writes, is also medeiraisa. It's all connected to hargasha, whatever it is. So this has a big enough kamina when it comes to kinuach. Somebody who's mekaneach herself after using the restroom, if it was mamish miyad, it could be not just a chumrah, but it could actually be medeiraisa, mikra din. Could be. So in today's day and age, we have to add a few more things because there are a few machshirim which in Eschadish bizmanenu. If anybody uses tampons, I'm saying it's negay for you to know. Pashat has an eitz or for yourself. If somebody puts in a tampon, if the wife puts in a tampon and there's a tipas dam on the tampon, this is mamish bedika. So if somebody's not comfortable with pads, okay, don't break your shalom bayis over it. But if somebody Pasha doesn't know, you can be miyayitz and eitz tever to the Rebbitzin, that if you're feeling cramps, maybe it's coming, maybe it's not coming, lav davka is the best thing to do, to put a tampon. Very pashut, because if you're going to find dam, it's a deraisa. There's not really a way out unless you have a makkah. A makkah is something which is not from the uterus and it's bleeding. Usually it's a cut, an irritation, something that bleeds. So, b'makom she'efsher, if it's not going to come in the expense of shalom bayis, it's a very good thing to be miyayitz to use a pad. Why a pad? A pad is a davar she'enim kabel tomo, dafka the disposable ones, the ones that are made to throw out, not the reusable ones. Reusable ones have a din of a beged, and it would have a regular din of a kasim. If you have a shir, if it's colored, whatever it is. But if it's a davar she'enim kabel tomo, a disposable pad, this is a very good thing. It pasha can help you. Even if there's going to be dam, as long as it's not a shir re'i, if it's not the period in the flow did not start, she's not a nida. It's a good thing to be perish. It's had suffix. It could be the period's going to come soon, but al pidin you do not have to keep archakis. So we're not running chalila to be metame shalabayla shalila tzairach. You have a pashta eitza that can mamish help people, especially if somebody's going through a hard time. Whatever you can do, but tahara yaser, you can mamish help people. And the other thing, another two things are those who have a heta from a rav to use something called meniyas hayrain, something which is called birth control. There's two forms which are inserted into the guf. A diaphragm and a nuva ring. It's important to know because if you ever hear of such a thing, the din of these machshirim, of these kalim, is it's mamish bedika. So when you're inserting it, when you're taking it out, extra care should be taken not to look. Because if you look, it's mamish like a bedika. And the only way out is if there's a makkah shemeitzi adam. So you have to see a bedekis. Also, another thing, an applicator. If somebody needs cream, an infection, whatever it is, what's common to use is an applicator. An applicator is a plastic tool. You put the cream inside, and it goes bifnim, you apply it inside. This is mamish bedika. Now, what's common is that sometimes applicators can mamish cause a petza, a makkah. As you're inserting it, you can scratch the cervix. So if you take out the applicator, first of all, don't look, because there's no chiyuv to look. If you did look, call the Rav, and it could be, he'll tell you to see a beidekis, because most likely, it's very, very shayach that you cut yourself. If you're now not seeing anything, there's no dam, now on the applicator you see dam, and you use an applicator, which this is a kli hamuchzak that it's going to cut. If you don't do it gently, if you put it too forceful, so don't look. If you looked, don't assume you're needed right away. Of course, you have to keep our chakis, because until it's 100% defined that there's a makkah shemeitzi adam, a makkah which bleeds, our chakis are kept 100%. So that's everything which is mederaisa, right? So anything which is bifnim, anything that goes inside, has a din of re'iyas dam mederaisa. If you have a period, if you have a shir re'iyas dam, it's mamish bleeding. This is also mederaisa. If you're seeing for a few days, you should call with a shaila. It's very possible this could be a light flow. Now let's get to ksamim. Yeah, that's all mederaisa. Today, there's a lot of ksamim. Ksamim you can see when you're counting the shiv nekiyim. Ksamim can happen, be made tara. Once a lady already toiveled in the mikveh, she's already tahira. There's such a thing as ksamim. For whatever reason it can be, either you're taking medication, or somebody's taking hormones, whatever it could be, you have something called ksamim. And we have to be magder what those are, and what's a problem and what's not a problem, like everything. So in Simkov Tzadik, that's where the dinim of ksamim are found. The Mechaber Paskins, Dvar Teira, Ein ha'isha matame v'le'asura l'bayla, ad shetagish yotz adami b'soda. As we said earlier, in order for a lady to be Tameya Midei, there has to be Argasha. V'chachamim gazra l'kasem shenimtza b'gufa b'v'gadel shehi Tameya. Chazal were geyser, they made a gzeira. This is halacha l'maisa. Just because it's derabanan, it should not be looked upon any less. A din is a din. Whether the shayrish is, it's midrabanon, whether it's midiraisa, there's no nafkamina. The nafkamina is for the Rav to know when you can be mitzaref tzaddik kul or not, but once the halacha is asura, tmeya, tahira, mutaris, that's halacha l'maisa. It doesn't make a difference. It's only midirabanon or midiraisa. So Chachamim were gazer on a kesim, a spot, a stain which is found on the guf, on the body, oy b'v'godeha, or on her garments. You find blood on your body, you find blood on your garments, tumas ksamim could apply if you have the right to know him. Now this is important. V'asura l'bayla afilu le'higisha v'afilu badka atzma motza tahira. Listen to this. What's a tovus hamatsuya, a mistake which is often made? You see blood, you right away run to make a bedika. It's a normal hergish. If a bedika comes out clean, maybe it's not a problem. So what did the Mechaber write? It's important to remember these klolim. Va'afilu bodka atzma umatzah tahira, if it's a kasam tameh, it doesn't make a difference. The way out, so to speak, when a kasim is not tameh, if it would have been tameh, it had the criteria to be a kasim tameh, the way that it's not tameh is if you have a taliyah. And there's more tzaddik kula by a kasim than on the bedika. It doesn't have to be a makash mitzi adam, shidduch saramon, kuf pezayin tzefhei. It's a big machekas rishayim, but by ksamim, everyone is meida that if it's a makkah she'einu mitzi adam, a makkah which does not bleed by itself, you could be toila. Again, don't do this by yourself. You have to call with a shayla, but it should be stored in the back of your mind. If you have absatliya, don't just pass l'chumra for yourself. Pick up the phone and call with a shayla. The Mechaber continues, she has to make hefsek tara, shetivdik atzma v'timtza tahira. What does it mean, hefsek tara? She makes a bedika, and she finds that it's clean. This is not the point of this shir, but it's important people to know. Clean doesn't mean there's nothing on the eid bedika. Timtza tahira is the pshat that there's no maris tmeyus, any redness. A tinge of red, pink, purple, whatever problematic colors there are, that's what should not be on the hefsek tara. If it's a brown, if it's a yellow, whatever it is, and you found it in bedika and it's a matic shada that Rav told you it's good, your bedika does not have to come out clean. And this is important because, people are nervous when it's every day, especially when you just got married. Every day is you have to chap another day, whatever it is. So you make another bedika, and this can mamish cause to cut yourself and to make things worse. So if it's a matic shada, you don't have to drive yourself crazy that it should be clean. Because some people won't get it clean on day 5. But they'll get a matic shada, which is okay. The full din of shiv nekim applies. Okay, good. Fine. That's the din of the Trumas Hadeshin that we mentioned. If she was margish and she didn't find anything, Yesh Misha Eimer, the signon, is Yesh Misha Eimer Shehit Tmeya. That's for Rav to know what that means. This Klali Mechaber. But that's the din of the Trumas Hadeshin. Okay, so Tumas Ksamim, just from the simple reading of the Mechaber, is a difference if there was Hargasha or there was no Hargasha, right? Pretty clear. Kuf Pe Gimel, when we discuss Nidim Deiraisa, there has to be Hargasha. Kuf Tzadik, we're dealing with Dinik Samim, that's Midrabanon. What do we say if there was no Hargasha? Even if you didn't see it leaving the body, had no connection with you, but you found it on your beged or on your body, so there's for sure no Hargasha, that's the din of Ksamim. Now, before we get to that, there's also another thing. There's also Re'iyas Dam, which is Vadim Agufa B'lei Hargasha. So in Kupei Gimel, the Alter Rebbe, Sevkatan Gimel, the Alter Rebbe brings some Taisvis, and it's a crazy placey, that any dam, which is Vadei Megufa, you see blood leaving the body. Sometimes, if somebody has something on the body, and they're looking, whatever it is, and they see dam from the body, this is much more chamor. Even though there was no Hargasha, but if any amount of dam is seen, which is Vadei Megufa, there's no shear. She's Tmeya right away. Again, if you call it of and you say that there's a Ke'ev, there's irritation. It could be that Rav's going to tell you to see a Beidekis. So don't run to be matami yourself, but that's the din. So until it's cleared out, you have to ask a Rav.
How does this work with the cloud that there's a cheskes of Arkasha whenever there's blood?
Oh, no, that's only if there's, which plant? No, what?
Saying the kesem.
Oh, very good shaila, very good shaila. That's a very, very good shaila. We'll leave it for later. This is a I'll repeat the shaila for everyone to think over. Maybe we can compare notes after. We just said earlier from the Rambam, the cheskes adam sheba behargasha. If I know the dam is coming from the rechem, and we said the reiv dam is coming from the rechem, that's a mishnah. So how can it only be midrabanan? Okay, we'll leave it on the side. It's a very good question. According to this, there's a lot of chumras, and in Mirz Hashem we'll discuss it, hopefully. If not, then you can call me later. So weiter again. So we said if any dam is seen which is vade megufa, that it for sure came from the body, so that as long as you know it came from the guf, and it was red, it was dam, so that it doesn't need a shear. There's no shear required. And why is that? So the place came right. What's the whole kul of a shear? Why do you need a shear gris? What is a shear gris? Where does that come from? Because in the days of Chazal, there was bugs everywhere. And if you would be geyser on any amount of dam, ein lecha isha tahira l'bayla, because there was always dam on the beds. You know, there's always these bugs, these creatures, and if you just turn around, you squashed a few. So Chazal and Meshayir, these bugs, how much blood can they give out? How much dam can be nispashed from these bugs? So they're Meshayir a shear gris. But if you know it's vade megufa, if you know it's for sure coming from her, you don't have your tliyah of the bugs. It's vade megufa. So the whole shear gris is lafuke memachelos from the bugs. But if it's coming vade from her, you don't have that tzad kula. There is a mild tzedakah, which the Minchas Yaakov, the Taharas Shlamim, someone learned pshat like that in the Taharas Shlamim himself, that says even there you have a shear gris. It's very, very difficult. First of all, to learn like that in the Taharas Shlamim, the mild tzedakah l'chayra, the Siddur Tara does learn like that in pshat in the mild tzedakah. It's very hard to understand because ultimately, he says legazru. If you don't have a shear gris, legazru, finished. I don't care. Machelis, no machelis. The din is legazru. Okay, we'll leave that on the side. So back to the Shulchan Aruch. So if somebody finds a kesem, what does it mean that she becomes a nida through this kesem? So if you find it on a beged, you need three things to make it a problem. You need to have, it has to be dam, obviously, right? It has to be a shear gris, and it has to be on a beged lavon, a white garment. If it's found on something which is white, but it doesn't have teres beged, it doesn't have a din of a garment, it's a davar shein mekabel tuma, you don't have this issue. Another kula b'ksamim is if you find it on something which is colored. Right? If something which is colored, then it's not an issue. Two examples of a davar shein mekabel tuma is, first of all, what we mentioned earlier is a pad. If you see dam on a pad, as long as there's no chash that it may be a period, it's not a problem. It does not render one nida. Number two is sometimes if you don't have a pad, you use a tissue. It's very common. You take a tissue, you fold it, you take toilet paper, and you put it on the beged, on the undergarment, not to get yourself dirty. This is not a kinuach. Kinuach is the definition that you took it off the body. This has a regular din of a pad of a davar shein mekabel tuma. So if you find dam on a pad, or if you find dam on a pad which is made from tissue, this is a davar shein mekabel tuma, and Chazal were not geyser on it. A few important nukudas, that even if the Rav tells you that the kasem is a kasem tahar, you're not nida, many times it is highly recommended to wait 24 hours and to be peirush just from tashmish. This does not mean that she's a nida and you have to keep her chakos. It's a precaution. Because what could be happening? It could be that the re'iyah is going to start. And this is the beginning of what's going to happen. Now, this does not make her a nida. and archakas do not have to be kept, but it's a strong recommendation to be peirush to abstain from relations for 24 hours. Usually within 24 hours you get a clear picture of what's going to be. Either it's completely nothing, or you see it's continuing, so on and so forth. If you have an abeged lavan on a white garment, if you have two spots, if they're not touching, they're separated, the din is they're not mitztaref. Each one has to have a shir gris v'eid on its own. So if you find on one part of the beged a kasim, you find on another part of the beged another kasim, and theoretically if together they would have a shir, if they're not touching, they're not mitztaref. And a kasim absara, here we go. A kasim absara, a kasim which is found in the body, is a big machlekes apeiskim. Do you have a shir gris or not? Halakha l'maisa, if it happens, pick up the phone and call. Don't run to be machmer, don't run to be mekel. It's a machlekes, the shach is machmer, many are mekel, whatever it is. It's a machlekes hadal mshad and alter rebbe. So many rabbanim have one kabbalah, other rabbanim may have a different kabbalah of how to paskin. Call your rav. So that's Bekitzer Ksamim. Now let's get to medical procedures. This is something which is very, very important and unfortunately not so commonly known. Medical procedures, there's something called Ein Psichas HaKaver B'lai Dam. What does that mean? Kaver means as you're entering, it's a machlekes, what it means. We'll get to that in a second. Let's just use the word of cervix for better. The cervix. If there's an opening of the cervix, this itself could render one nida, even if there was no actual dam seen. This is the klal of Ein Psichas HaKaver B'lai Dam. It's brought in Simon Kuf Beiches and also in Simon Kuf Tzadik Daled. How much needs to be opened in order to be considered Psichas HaKaver? So the lashon of the Beis Yosef is dak min adakin. We don't have a bekius in what the shir is, and the lashon of the Beis Yosef is dak min adakin. So many rabbanim, there's many different shittas. Some hold 2 millimeters, some hold 3 millimeters, some hold up to 4 millimeters. You have the famous shit of Rabbi. Whatever it is, before any procedure is done, you have to know how far is the doctor going. Is the doctor going past the cervix, not past the cervix? Even if the doctor is touching the cervix, there's two parts of the cervix. There's the internal os and the external os. I don't have a chart, but there's the internal os, which is right before the uterus, and then there's the external os. There's a machlekes apeiskim of what needs to be opened. Does it need to be open on the bottom one, the external os? If you open it here, that's already considered Ein Psichas HaKaver B'lai Dam. Or maybe if you open it on the top one, dafka, there's a psich on the higher one, that's considered Ein Psichas HaKaver B'lai Dam. Whatever the case is, you have to call and ask a shayla. You have to, before you go to the appointment, you have to ask the doctor. This was mentioned last week, I'm just repeating it. What is the name of the procedure? It's very possible, often with a pap smear, it may touch the external part of the cervix and does not actually go in. And even if it goes in a little bit, it's nowhere near the internal os. So most pap smears do not render one nida. You should still call with a shayla, because sometimes if Chas v'Shalom they find something, they may want to do it again. And they may want to go deeper. So that's already much more of a serious shayla. So you have to know what the name of the procedure is. And you have to ask the doctor, l'chatchila, how deep are you going? Are you going past the cervix? You're not going past the cervix? Are you going past the external os, past the internal os? If it's too confusing, you can send me a message later. I'll write it out for you in English exactly what to ask. And most importantly, how wide is this catheter? How wide is this tool that the doctor is using? Because again, even if the doctor is going past the cervix, some tools do not have the shear. You could have a tool which is only 1 millimeter, and 1 millimeter by itself is not an issue. This is all if there's no dam. If there was dam, then that unfortunately that would render one nida. And I just want to, this is very, very important for people to know, there's a Noida B'Yehuda the Pischei Tshuva brings him, Simkov Tzadik Daled, Sivkot and Daled, have a look. It's important to know this. These dinim of Ein Psichas HaKever B'lei Dam, it applies whether or not what opened the cervix was from the inside or from the outside. It makes no difference. It doesn't make a difference also the status of the lady. If she's a Meinekes, if she's a Muberes, if she's a Zakena, which is Musulekes Domim, somebody who does not get periods anymore, the din, the Noid Yehuda writes, the din of Ein Psichas HaKever B'lei Dam still applies. And just today I got a call from somebody who's already Kemat Musulekes Domim, but she's going to have a procedure. So she had to find out exactly what this procedure is, because even if she didn't have a period in a long time, this does not take away the din of Ein Psichas HaKever B'lei Dam. It's important to remember. Oh, good timing. Okay, and the last two things is Leida and Chman Islam, the opposite, Hapala. Leida is giving birth, and Hapala is Chman Islam, the opposite. So this is a very common shaila, and even at one point I had a standardized answer. I would just send it out, but I got a new phone, so I lost it. What are the gedarim? At what point does one become a nida by Leida? So the answer is there's three things. If she's yeshavas ala mashber, what does that mean? That means that the tzirim, the contractions are very, very strong that she can no longer walk by herself. She needs to be helped out. If it's that strong, where Toila, there's already a psichas hakever. It's already getting there. And again, if there's psichas hakever, even if there's no dam, that itself is metameh. That's number one. Number two, if the water breaks, but there's a catch. Water breaking automatically does not render one nida. There's a few factors. If it's a little bit of water, and you know bevados that there's no dam that came out with it, that does not render one nida. Dam is not water. Water is not dam. Just because the water broke, that does not render one nida. However, if there was yiridas hamayim, the water did break, and there was a kamus, a big amount, to such a degree that you cannot know for sure that dam came out with it, at that point, we are machmer that she does become a nida. And the third thing is very simple. If there was blood, labor started, and she saw blood. As simple as that. If that's the third thing that happens, then of course that by itself does render one nida. A common shaila is the mucus plug, pekak harechem. When the mucus plug is literally a plug which sits on the cervix to hold the baby inside. And once the mucus plug leaves, many people get scared. Oh no, is this blood? The answer is a mucus plug on its own is not dam, and it does not render one nida. There's a catch. If dam came out with a mucus plug, you should ask a shayla. Many peskim are mekel, because it's known, it's a davar yadul, and this is the derech, that dam from the cervix, not from the rechem, comes with the mucus plug. And don't take this as halacha l'maisa. Ask a shayla, because there could be other factors involved. If it's already strong contractions, it may not apply this heter, and it could be this heter won't apply for you to begin with. Whatever it is, you have to know to ask a shayla. And Rachman sign by the opposite, if there's a hapala, so any dam which is seen because of the hapala, now this is a very vague term. What does it mean, because of the hapala? This is the klal, and any dam which is because of the hapala, that itself, even if the hapala itself did not take place yet, this does render one nida. What does that mean? How can you know? Sometimes there's staining which is completely unrelated. So the answer is, call your Rav and call the doctor. Sometimes the doctor won't know, so you have to call the Rav back and he'll guide you further on what to do. But if blood is seen and somebody knows that unfortunately a hapala, a miscarriage is on the way, a shayla should most definitely be asked. And the last thing is somebody who says, Tmeya ani. I'm a nida. It's a very, very geschmacka halacha to learn, really. Because if you look in the Gemara and Ksubis, where this halacha comes from, you won't see Rishonim discussing it. The whole discussion comes already later on, the Chasam Sefer, the Noid Yehuda, There's Alter Rebbe in Hilchos Shchit in the Kutas Achrein. What does it mean? If somebody says, I'm a nida, so there's no dam, there's no agasha, there's no kasim, nothing, that itself renders one nida. So, some achreinim, some paiskim write, what does it mean? How does this halacha work? It means that midin neder, midin shavua, there's an afkamina between them, that as soon as somebody says that, midin neder, they become one, and they have to fully act as if they're a nida. Or some say it's midin shavua, so now she has to act like a nida. The Alter Rebbe has a very, very interesting haggadah. If you look at Hilchos Shchita, it's brought by the din of a tabach that marked off a certain kevis, the head of the animal, and he said it's a nevela, he said it's a treifa, you can't eat it. Why did he say it though? Because he wanted to keep it for himself. He didn't want anyone else to buy it, so he can buy it or he can take it for himself home later on. The halacha is, Shavia nafshei chaticha de'asura. A person, once you say something is no good, it's tamei, it's pasul, whatever it is, the halacha is, Shavia nafshei chaticha de'asura. You actually made it for yourself also. This is not the Alter Rebbe, Shavia nafshei chaticha de'asura. This is the klal. And the Alter Rebbe explains, how does this halacha work? An interesting lashon Alter Rebbe writes, because a person is just like a bezdin. And just like a bezdin has the koyach to be gezer, and aser, matter, whatever it is, a person can do that for himself also. So if somebody says, Tmeya Ani, she actually does become a nida. And she actually has to count 5 days, the Shiv Nikim, with all the appropriate bedikas. There's already a machlekes, do you make a brach on the tefillah? Some actually say you do, because you made yourself into a nida. And you have to keep all the dinim associated with nida. How do you get out of it, if there's a way out of it? So if I'm not mistaken, the Rabbi Yerucham writes, if she was chayzer ba teich kedei dibur, if right away she said, no, I'm not, she caught herself teich kedei dibur, then she got herself out of it. And the other way is if she had an amasla. An amasla means she had a good excuse. I only said that because our family is at home and I know you wanted something, so I said it because I didn't feel comfortable. That's the example which is brought in Shulchan Aruch and the Paiskim. Or the other example which is brought is she didn't have the koyach, so she said that. That is already considered an acceptable amasla, and she does not become nida. So, as far as I remember, we covered all of the things of how somebody can become a nida, and we'll do the Q&A if anybody has questions. That I want to leave for later because it's not so much halacha on my side. We'll speak after. That's a.
Just a short nekuda I think is really, really important to point out. Before any medical procedure, call a rav before.
Oh, we said it.
I missed it. What kelim should or shouldn't be used, and then before you call a doctor back, always you say with the rav which questions to ask. Because many times, it falls under a little bit of what Rabbi Brennan discussed, but many times you just call back the Rav, this is what the doctor said, and the doctor is not mafkin. But once you give the information to the Rav, that's what you're going to deal with.
So the question is, can you explain Zivas Avalach if she felt inside or outside? So outside, we mentioned earlier, is completely disregarded. Any wetness mibachutz, we don't consider that hargasha. Bifnim, on the inside, we explained that there's a machlekes. According to Nedi Yehuda, any wetness of a flow, any zivas davalach, you feel wetness, a flow of wetness, that is already considered hargasha. According to the Chavaz Das, no, that's not hargasha. Hargasha is when you feel the wetness as the dam is leaving the actual rechem, the uterus. Was that clear?
So if she doesn't, if she feels something, then you don't have to do a chakas until she actually sees the blood.
If you feel it where?
If she feels on the outside.
Correct. That's right.
Meaning, even if she's sure that it's her period, she doesn't have to do a chakas.
If you're sure it's your period, you should look. Don't ignore it. That's what I mentioned earlier. If it didn't reach a credit card or $50, but this is the flow, you have all the symptoms, you mamish feel there's a kamas godel down, you can't ignore it. One has to look to make sure. Maybe it's not, but you have to look. there was a shaila asked about vestis. If somebody has mikrim, somebody feels, so I don't know if it's going to be addressed in the Shema Vestis, so maybe we'll speak about it now. If somebody has something called PMS, excuse me, I don't remember what the Rosh Hashanah stand for, the symptoms, the simonim, is that, and it happened for sure 3 times, is that considered a Vestis Kavul Mikrim? So I heard from the Deber Tzin, how do we treat these symptoms? We treat it just like the din of the Vestis of the Trumas Hadeshin. In Siman Kuf Pei Vav and Siv Gimel, the Mechaber brings the din of the Trumas Hadeshin. What does that mean? What is the din? The din is that for sure she doesn't see for 14 days, so until then she has Cheskas Tara. After 14 days, it's called Baloshin Ha'elam Yamim She'enam B'tuchim. She could see the period at any moment. So Baal Nefesh should make a bedika lifnei tashmish even. Baal Nefesh should make a bedika lifnei tashmish. Sounds makabel. So how do we deal with PMS? It has the same din of the Vestis Atrumas Hadeshin. That's how we treat it. And you make a bedika lifnei tashmish.
If it's after the 14 days.
No. If you know that if you have the PMS, we treat it 14 days, 15 days, whatever amount of days it is. The fact that the PMS started, we treat it as the Vestis Atrumas Hadeshin, that you should make not just a Baal Nefesh, you actually, Eitz Atayva, and a very practical Eitz, so you should definitely make a Bedika. Is saying I'm on my period the same as I'm Nida? That's a very good question. So, the answer is, it is treated as, it's pretty much saying I'm a nida, because a period is what causes something to become a nida. And there's a shach in Kuf Pei Hey, I did mention it, but it's important. The shach writes that if a lady says I'm a nida, or I saw blood, which is pretty much saying I'm on my period, and after it was this batter, it was coming from a dam makah, so the din of Shavi Nafsh we do not say. She has the way to fix it. If later on it was this gala that it's a makkah, or later on you asked the Shaila to Rav, and the Rav told you this is not a Kasim Tameh, the whole thing was said betos, so that actually you have a way of saving it, so to speak. So yes, by saying I'm on my period or I'm seeing blood, seeing blood is not necessary. Yeah, because the Shach, if I'm not mistaken, does write seeing blood. So yes, if you say I saw blood or I'm on my period, it is treated as saying I'm a nida. This is a very, very good question. They're all very good questions. Pashta Shaila. There's different paths. Some absorb better, they're going to absorb deeper. Some may spread out more. So how does it work with the $0.50, half of a dollar? How you measure that? So the simple answer is, you're right, it's not so pashut, because it's not like a sheer griz. By a sheer griz is a siddur tara that writes, you measure it the way you found it. Even if you were to smudge it out, you would for sure have the sheer griz, but the din is, you go by the way it was found. This does not apply by the shear of Erech Kanashim, so to speak. The eitzah is you have to show it to a Rav. Because again, as was mentioned earlier, it could be that there's colors which are not problematic mixed in, and that's not part of the shear, that's not part of the cheshbon. And it could be that it's true. On one side of the pad, it's very small, that it mamish absorbed very deeply, and if you turn it over, you'll see it filled up the other side. Or if you don't see it clearly, if you rip it up, it mamish filled up the other side. So these inyanim, it's very hard to judge by yourself. You have to call or bring it to a Rav. Best for sure to bring it, especially if you live here. Yeah, so that's all the Shamos and Shuvas. Yeah, questions? Any more? Baruch Hashem.
Tuesday.
Okay.
Thank you all very much for coming. But please stay tuned. Yazis Hashem next Tuesday. Rabbi Old Time, the Chaver of the translator of Rabbi Farkash's Sefer, Kara Kalacha, will be giving a review and refresher on Hilchos Vestis, Precious, and calculating the dates, the calendar. Please be here 8 o'clock. We're making it Tuesday instead of Wednesday due to Lag BaOmer.
Relations.